The phone rang just after midnight, a soft, insistent buzz that cut through the silence. I glanced at the screen and froze. My own number glowed back at me, white and unyielding. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the green icon, heartbeat hammering in my ears. Against every instinct, I swiped to answer. My voice caught in my throat as I spoke. No one responded, just a faint, static-laced breathing that sounded eerily like mine. I lowered the phone, shaking, convinced I had misheard. The line was empty, but the number hadn't lied. I set the phone on the nightstand, the glow of the screen reflecting off the ceiling. Each second stretched unbearably long, the silence swelling around me. I checked the time. It was exactly 12:03 a.m., and yet the phone vibrated again, my number flashing insistently. I sat upright, mind racing, unable to look away. I could almost hear my own voice whispering from somewhere distant, a warped echo of myself. The call ended suddenly, leaving only the hum of the phone and the taste of dread in my mouth. Morning light spilled across my apartment, soft and ordinary. I made coffee, the aroma grounding me, a thin barrier against the unease from last night. The phone lay on the counter, screen blank, as if nothing had happened. I tried to shake it off. I walked to work, headphones in, playlists looping familiar songs. Everything was normal, the clatter of keyboards, the hum of fluorescent lights, but a strange awareness clung to me. Every time my phone buzzed in my pocket, I flinched, half expecting my own number to appear. At lunch, I met a colleague at the cafe down the street. We laughed about a shared project mishap, the conversation flowing easily. I sipped my tea and tried to focus on normal life, though the shadow of last night's call lingered at the edge of my mind. Back at the office, the hours slipped by quietly. I answered emails, drafted reports, and filed documents. The phone remained silent, an innocent device once more. Still, I caught myself glancing at it repeatedly, fingers twitching toward the screen as if anticipating something. After work, I stopped at the corner store for groceries. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the cashier's smile seemed brighter than usual. I paid and left, the evening air crisp and ordinary. Nothing had changed, yet a low, unshakable tension hummed under my skin. I cooked dinner, listening to the soft hiss of the stove. The apartment smelled of onions and garlic, the mundane comfort of routine. I set my phone beside me, screen down, telling myself I would not give in to irrational fear. My own number could not possibly call me. By the time I settled on the couch, a book in hand, the day had begun to feel almost normal. The sunlight faded through the curtains, casting long shadows that did not frighten me, only reminded me of the ordinary pattern of life. Later, I took a shower, the warm water washing away lingering tension. Steam fogged the mirror, droplets tracing faint lines across the glass. I stared at my reflection, steadying my breath. Everything was fine. Nothing had happened. It was a single, inexplicable moment, nothing more. I checked my phone one last time before bed. Notifications were ordinary, messages from friends, a calendar reminder, nothing unusual. I set it aside, sliding under the covers, convincing myself that the night's fear was a trick of exhaustion and imagination. Sleep came slowly, but it came. Dreams were fragmented, a room I didn't recognize, shadows that moved against logic, but nothing alarming. I woke in the morning feeling tired but safe, reassured that the strange call had been nothing more than a fluke. The first oddity arrived mid-morning. My phone lit up with a notification from an unknown app one hadn't installed. The icon was a simple white square, empty inside, but when I tapped it, it vanished, leaving no trace. My pulse quickened at the inexplicable glitch. I shrugged it off, thinking it was a system bug. Yet when I unlocked the phone, the home screen briefly flickered, showing a wallpaper I didn't recognize, my apartment, photographed from the hallway. The image vanished before I could process it, leaving only the familiar background. At lunch, I noticed a call log entry I couldn't explain. My own number appeared, time-stamped 3 minutes earlier. I didn't remember calling myself. I stared at the screen, scrolling up and down, but the call had no duration, no record of connection, just a ghostly mark in the log. Later, a delivery arrived I hadn't ordered. The box was empty except for a small, folded piece of paper with my name written neatly. Inside, the paper was blank, but I felt a subtle, creeping sense of recognition, as if I'd folded it myself, though I knew I hadn't. Walking home, streetlights flickered in sequence as I passed. I shook my head, muttering about electrical problems, but a part of me kept counting steps, noticing how the shadows bent strangely, as if aware of my presence. Every mundane sound seemed amplified. At the elevator, the mirror reflected me perfectly, yet for a moment I thought I saw a subtle delay in my reflection's movement. I frowned, brushing it off as a trick of the fluorescent light. Still, the sensation lingered, a whisper at the edge of perception. I entered my apartment, setting down keys and bag with a clatter. The phone sat on the counter, screen dark. I noticed the battery had dropped inexplicably by 10%. I hadn't touched it all day. I tried to rationalize it. Background processes, maybe, but unease pooled in my stomach. Dinner was quiet, eaten alone, the tick of the wall clock marking each second. I kept checking the phone, expecting, hoping, for it to be normal. But every glance was tense, anticipatory. My own number had not called, yet its presence lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. I washed the dishes, warm water on my hands, eyes flicking to the phone with every rinse. In the reflection of the faucet, I thought I saw the faint outline of a face behind me. I spun around. Empty apartment, only the hum of the water and my own uneven breathing. Before bed, I received a message from an unknown number. It simply read, "Do you see me?" My pulse skyrocketed. I stared at the text, staring at my own number displayed at the top. I knew immediately I had answered it, though I couldn't remember ever sending the message. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone as if it held answers. Rationally, I told myself it had to be a prank, maybe a hacker or a glitch in the network. Nothing supernatural. My heart refused to accept logic, but my mind tried. The next morning, I powered off the phone completely. I left it in another room while I showered, determined to ignore it. When I returned, the screen lit up on its own. My number blinked in the call log. I convinced myself it was a coincidence, some delayed notification. At work, I told a friend about the calls. He laughed, suggesting I had forgotten setting up some app or alarm. "Phones do weird things," he said. I nodded, forcing a smile, hoping he was right. Humor and reason were lifelines against the creeping fear. In the afternoon, I tested the phone, calling another number. No strange feedback, no echo, nothing unusual. Everything functioned perfectly. Maybe last night was a dream, a stress-induced hallucination. I tried to breathe, steady my pulse. It had to be normal. That evening, I left the apartment to run errands. The streets were busy, faces blurred in motion. I felt the tension loosen slightly, replaced with mundane observation. Perhaps stepping outside and into the world was enough to reset my perspective. I stopped at a cafe, coffee in hand, scrolling through emails. No messages from unknown numbers, no strange apps, no calls from myself. Everything was ordinary. The world outside my apartment had not shifted. Maybe I was letting imagination take over my perception. Back at home, I double-checked settings on the phone. No unusual apps, no hidden logs, no way for calls to originate from my own number. I exhaled slowly, relief battling the lingering sense of dread. Everything appeared in order. I tried to focus on routine, cooking, cleaning, tidying. The hum of appliances, the faint scent of dinner, all were reassuringly normal. Nothing out of place. My rational mind clung to these small certainties, asserting order over the creeping chaos in my thoughts. Before bed, I charged the phone on the nightstand and placed it face down. I told myself firmly that I wouldn't check it again until morning. Rationally, Logically, it was safe. There was no reason to fear what might happen in the silence of the night. I fell asleep finally, drifting into exhaustion. The unease still lingered like a shadow, but I told myself it was imagination, stress, or coincidence. My own number calling me? Impossible. Nothing about last night had any rational explanation beyond glitches I could ignore. The first repetition occurred subtly. I woke to the vibration of the phone on the counter. My number flashed again. I hesitated, rational thought battling instinct. My thumb trembled over the screen. I answered, and silence greeted me, thick and unyielding, but familiar in a way that gnawed at me. The next day, at the coffee shop, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, thinking it must be someone else. When I checked later, my number appeared in the log again, time-stamped while I had been standing in line. I hadn't touched the phone in minutes. That night, the call came at exactly 11:47 p.m. The pattern made my stomach churn. I didn't answer, but the vibration was insistent, almost mocking. I noticed a faint static that lingered even after the call ended. It felt like breathing, mine, but distorted. The following morning, a text appeared from my own number. "I watched you sleep." My hands shook. I deleted it immediately, trying to convince myself it was a prank, though the timing matched the previous night perfectly. My safe, ordinary life felt fractured. Over the next few days, the calls and texts increased. Each came at irregular intervals, but always my number. Each message contained vague, unsettling observations. "You're alone now. I see the light flicker. Do you remember last time?" The pattern was deliberate. I began noticing small coincidences during the day. Doors that I was sure I had locked were ajar. Lights flickered in rooms I hadn't entered. My reflection in windows seemed delayed by a fraction of a second. Rationality clung desperately, but cracks were forming. One evening, the phone buzzed while I was cooking. I answered reluctantly. Static, soft breathing, then a whisper I recognized as my own voice saying, "You forgot the stove." I froze. The stove was off. I hadn't left it on. My mind screamed at me to ignore it, yet I couldn't. At work, I caught myself checking the time repeatedly, noting when the next call might come. I felt watched, as if my phone tracked more than just calls. Emails, files, even my movements seemed anticipated. The pattern was no longer random. It was deliberate and methodical. I began sleeping with the phone across the room, but even then, the calls found me. Vibrations shook the floor, the screen lighting up in the dark, showing only my own number. The messages now included fragments of my day. Coffee spilled, keys dropped, walking home alone. The repetition had become predictable, inescapable. Each call, each message, each subtle observation confirmed the pattern. Someone, or something, was mirroring me. My rational explanations were failing. My ordinary life had begun to feel like a staged performance, with an unseen observer. The next day, I noticed small objects slightly out of place. A mug rotated, a pen shifted. I hadn't touched them. My phone buzzed my number again. The message read, "I moved it." The pattern was not only persistent, it was invasive, threading through every moment of my day. At night, I watched shadows in the apartment bend unnaturally. Each call, each message, matched them, mirrored them. I tried to record the phone to capture evidence, but files vanished before I could save them. The pattern was no longer just calls. It had become a presence in my home. The messages began using my words. Phrases I'd spoken earlier in the day appeared verbatim on the screen, sent from my own number. Private thoughts, muttered complaints, half-formed sentences. I hadn't written them down anywhere. Seeing them reflected back felt like being stripped open. One call came while I was brushing my teeth. I answered without thinking. My voice spoke immediately, calm and intimate, describing the exact movement of my hand, the mint on my tongue, the way my eyes avoided the mirror. I dropped the phone, heart pounding violently. After that, the calls addressed me differently. "You remember this?" One text read, followed by a detail from my childhood bedroom, something I had never shared with anyone. The familiarity wasn't just invasive, it felt possessive, as if the caller had always been with me. I tried changing my number. The process took an hour at the service center, paperwork and signatures grounding me briefly. When I powered on the phone, the first notification arrived instantly. A call from the new number. Caller ID me. My breath left my body in a thin, useless gasp. The messages shifted in tone, no longer observational but corrective. That's not how you used to walk. You hesitated there. You're forgetting details. It felt less like harassment and more like instruction, as though I were being coached back into a version of myself I couldn't remember. One evening, the phone rang and I answered. My voice spoke again, but older, heavier. It said, "You're late this time." I asked late for what? There was a pause, then a sigh that carried disappointment. For switching places, it replied quietly before hanging up. I stopped recognizing my own routines. I'd find myself standing in rooms without remembering walking there. My phone would buzz seconds later. You drifted again. The idea that I was losing time terrified me more than the calls themselves. Something was filling the gaps I left behind. The mirror became unbearable. I'd catch my reflection watching me too intently, eyes lingering when mine moved away. Once, my phone vibrated as I stared at myself. The message read, "You look less like me every day." I felt suddenly, profoundly replaceable. Sleep offered no escape. I dreamed in first person, then second, then something skewed. I'd wake to messages describing dreams I hadn't yet remembered. "You always choose that door," one text said. I lay still, realizing someone else knew my mind's pathways better than I did. The calls no longer scared me as much as they unsettled my sense of ownership. My memories felt shared. My habits felt borrowed. When the phone rang now, I didn't wonder who was calling. I wondered which of us was answering, and who the call was really meant for. I stopped leaving the apartment. The streets felt unsafe, every passerby potentially an observer, every reflection a mimic. My phone buzzed constantly, catching movements I hadn't made yet. Even windows felt like screens, and I avoided them, covering mirrors, blocking light, isolating myself from the world. Friends called, concerned, but I stopped answering. Every conversation felt contaminated, as if the voice on the other end could be replaced mid-sentence by my own echo. Even texts were suspect. I couldn't trust communication, couldn't trust anyone outside myself, or what I thought was myself. Grocery runs became risky. I began ordering food delivery, but packages arrived with notes I hadn't written, detailing exactly what I had been thinking. The phone buzzed with confirmation as soon as I opened the door. I stopped ordering, surviving on whatever was already in the fridge. Sleep became fragmented. I would wake at odd hours, phone in hand, buzzing. Messages contained my thoughts from seconds before. I tried putting it in another room, locking it, even throwing it across the apartment. Nothing stopped it. My own number always found me, always mirrored me. I tried reasoning with it. I sent texts asking, "Who are you?" Replies came instantly, answering my own questions before I finished. Each one revealed intimate knowledge I hadn't shared, moments I hadn't lived consciously yet. I realized the phone had become a conduit for something impossible. Isolation distorted time. Days blended together as I tracked patterns, noting every buzz, every call, every message. Sleep deprivation made shadows crawl along walls and ceilings. I spoke aloud to myself, trying to anchor sanity, but even that conversation seemed intercepted, rewritten in messages I hadn't sent. The apartment became a labyrinth of barriers. I covered mirrors, taped over windows, unplugged electronics. Still, the phone rang relentlessly, vibrating on surfaces I couldn't see. I began hearing soft echoes of my own voice outside the apartment, or maybe in my head, matching the cadence of the calls. I stopped looking outside. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, I moved like a ghost inside my own home. Every sound was a potential mimic. Footsteps in the hall, The rustle of paper, distant engines. Each could be anticipating me, mirroring me, correcting me. I feared even breathing incorrectly. I noticed small traces of myself where they shouldn't be. My handwriting in places I hadn't written, objects subtly shifted, crumbs and patterns matching my movements. Each trace confirmed the truth I didn't want to face. Something, or someone, was not only following me, it was becoming me. By the 7th day of this self-imposed exile, I realized I hadn't spoken to anyone in person for nearly a week. My only companion, or adversary, was the phone. Its constant, mirrored presence had erased all boundaries. I was alone, but not. My own number called again, and I hesitated before picking up. I finally answered without fear. The voice didn't speak immediately. Instead, I heard a room tone I recognized too well, the low hum of my apartment at night. Then my voice said, gently, "You're the echo. I'm the one who stayed." Memories surfaced out of sequence. A night months ago, a breakdown I couldn't fully recall, a moment where I'd pressed call instead of end. I remembered staring at my phone, wishing I could step outside myself, just for a while. The voice explained nothing directly. It didn't need to. It described choices I didn't remember making, routines I no longer followed, corrections I kept resisting. "You left gaps," it said. "I filled them. Now you don't fit cleanly anymore." I realized the calls had never come from elsewhere. They came from continuity, from a version of me that never paused, never dissociated, never slipped. The phone wasn't contacting another place. It was maintaining a connection I'd already opened. When I looked in the mirror again, I saw it clearly. The reflection didn't lag anymore. It looked steadier than I felt, more complete. My phone buzzed once softly. The message read, "You can rest now." The call ended on its own. For the first time in weeks, the phone went silent. I understood then that I wasn't being haunted or replaced. I was being phased out, gently, by a version of myself that no longer needed me to answer. Days passed without a single call. The silence felt unnatural, heavier than the buzzing ever was. I moved through the apartment carefully, as if my presence might disrupt something delicate. Objects stayed where I left them, but I no longer trusted that meant anything. When I spoke aloud, my voice sounded unfamiliar, thinner somehow. I checked the phone compulsively, hoping and dreading a notification. Nothing came. It was as if I'd been muted, cut off from a channel I didn't realize I depended on to feel real. Sometimes, I catch myself mid-action and hesitate, unsure if I'm doing it correctly. I wonder if someone else used to do it better. In reflections, I still look like me, but there's a faint sense I'm imitating rather than originating. Last night, my phone lit up briefly without vibrating. No call, no message, just my number on the screen, then darkness. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure which of us it would reach now, or whether I was still the one meant to respond.